life's beautiful as is. You know, there's a version of this world and society that we could have created, and maybe in some places exists, where we work together as a community to all have enough, and with the purpose of just experiencing life, having enough to experience and be present with life. Humans, we love to create. We love to build. We are, like, to our DNA, we are builders and creators. The reason why we create matters.
Welcome to the Bountifull Podcast, where we explore what it means to live a bountiful life. Today, I'm excited to have David Spinks joining us on the show. David is a thought leader, author, and pioneer in the world of community building. As a co-founder of CMX, a community for community managers, and author of The Business of Belonging, he's spent his career helping people and organizations understand the profound power of community. Community is not a new concept. It's been around since the dawn of time. But today, as our personal and professional lives intersect more than ever, the idea of creating spaces where we feel a sense of belonging and shared purpose has become ever more important. In this conversation, we'll explore the deep connection between belonging and purpose, and how building authentic relationships can shape not just our work, but also our lives. David will also share how taking a sabbatical gave him the space to reflect, recalibrate, and rethink about what truly matters, offering lessons about the rhythms of work, rest, and reinvention. We'll talk about why community and connection are at the heart of living a bountiful life, and how intentional spaces and meaningful relationships can amplify joy and purpose. This episode is sure to inspire you to think about how you connect with others, and maybe even how you connect with yourself. So David, welcome to the Bountifull Podcast.
Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
So I guess first things first, what's your definition of community now?
Yeah, the definition of community is a moving target. The reason I struggle with this question is because it's a term that is just very broadly used. And so there's no definition I can give that will accommodate everybody's experience of community. And so the way I think about defining community is less about defining a group of people as, oh, you are a community or you are not, and more about just an experience that people have. It's a sense. We call it a sense of community. So if there's a group of people who feel like they are part of a community and they're in community, it's a community, right? That's their perspective. If I'm to call something a community, but the people within it wouldn't call themselves a community, maybe not the right application of that word.
Can you share a little bit about your upbringing and background, and I guess how we ended up here today in New York?
How far back you want to go?
However far you want to go.
Yeah, so I mean, my life started here in New York. I was born in Long Island, in Long Beach, to two immigrant parents. My mom was born in Israel. My dad was born in Ireland. They met in Israel, got married, moved to the US, and I was born a year later. So I entered this world without much of a community. We didn't have any friends. We had one, my uncle was here, my cousins, that was it, just small family. And so my parents had to build their community from the ground up. And I think they built their community largely through me and my sister, right? Because when you have kids, that's how you build community and make friends. And so, I think that impacted me in a way of really valuing and yearning for community. I think my parents really craved it, and that was probably passed on to me as well. I really sought out belonging and being included, and I was a kid that was just wanted to be in every single group. I didn't want just one group. I wanted to be friends with everybody. Turns out that's a pretty bad social strategy, because I ended up just not really belonging anywhere for very long. Ended up finding community online very early through video games when I couldn't find a lot of belonging locally. I went to video games, became really good at a game called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. And started a clan with a friend in that game that did really well. We ended up starting an online forum that ended up becoming one of the most popular forums for the game. So I was in middle school managing this pretty large online forum, and learned a lot very early about what community looks like on the internet. I think we were using, there's like BB Press, and there's just like all these like forum softwares, and we were using IRC was our chat rooms. So yeah, pretty early days
Old school
internet community. And so I think that just like made me pretty comfortable at an early age with connecting with strangers on the internet. Like before that was a normal thing.
Yeah.
And so when it became a normal thing, I was very well prepared and comfortable in that world.
Like, right on.
Yeah, I've been doing this a long time. And, my first job out of college in 2009 was a community manager, which wasn't really a job at the time, as you know.
Still not really a job.
Still working on it. And so, for those of us who were in the industry that early, we had to figure a lot of things out for ourselves and kind of define the way you do this work, carve our own path. Did that for a few years, started a couple companies. I was also very entrepreneurial throughout my career. And that eventually led to co-founding CMX as a community and a resource to try to help all the people we were meeting that were also doing this work, building community professionally, trying to give them the support and training and research and all the resources that they would need to be able to be effective in this job. I could keep going. I did that for
Why not?
8 years. We were acquired by a company called Bevy after 5 years. I stayed at Bevy for 3 years. I stepped down from Bevy 2 years ago into my sabbatical, and that kicked off a journey, we'll say, that I've learned a lot through. I've had my dark night of the soul, in a way, revisited a lot of my relationship with work and community, and kind of have only recently emerged on the other side of that, now working as a coach, both with community leaders and founders and with high achievers, helping them redefine their relationship with work in the way I did as well.
Which we can get into more.
Yeah, I figure we'll table that one.
Yeah, we'll get into that more later. Thank you for sharing. It is fascinating, and it is a throwback, I think. There's something about New York for me where, coming from New Zealand, tiny country, bottom of the earth, every time I come to New York for work, there's always just a little part of me that goes, yes! Where I go, it's kind of just one of the biggest places in the world to do worky things.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, I think I came here with Proto Hack, so was paid by someone else to be here. And then I think one time I did videos for CMX and Sales Hacker. And so that was another time when I was yes, this. And so to be back again on my own dime, really, and to be doing something completely aligned with my soul and not really anything to do with, I guess, community or career stuff. Yeah. It's just kind of a throwback and pretty cool.
Yeah, that resonates. I grew up in New York, went to school upstate, lived in the city for a few years. And I remember walking through the streets as a young 20-year-old, and, the role models for many in our generation were Mark Zuckerberg, and Gary Vee was everywhere at the time. And I just remember feeling that energy and walking through the streets and looking at these big buildings and being one day one of those buildings will be mine. I'll have my name on a building. It's just something I couldn't care less about today. But at the time, for somebody who's hungry, New York feeds that hunger, and it normalizes that hunger. Everyone here is just fucking hustling.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back now too. So I moved to San Francisco. I was there for 10 years, which has its own form of hustle and ambition, different than New York, but also intense. Coming back to New York now, I moved back in 2 years ago. Just, as a completely different person with very different values and priorities, and the way I'm yearning to connect with this community feels entirely different than it did 12 years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been wandering around the last few days or 48 hours since I got here, and I find myself searching for the joy in people. because, you know, like the hustle is like kind of palpable, where everyone's just like beelining, rushing around, going about their day. But then you see certain people that are just like having the best day, wearing all their emotions on their face. They're like very joyful. I don't think I would have been searching for that.
Yeah, it makes me think that like New York can kind of give you a little bit of everything, and what you notice is a bit of a mirror for your own values. And so yesterday I had some time to kill, so I just sat in the park in Union Square and just kind of like people watched for a while.
Awesome.
And there's so much, right? So many different people having a completely different experience, and you can kind of tune into lots of different ways of living in this space.
This is a running joke for today, but the episode I'm launching this week, which is a season finale of season 1, is my friend Spina Reed. She's a psychologist from Australia, and she did this thing in her episode where she's like, we all walk around with our antennas on our head, and wherever we tune them to is what we're going to pay, like is what we're going to get back from the world. And then my last guest did it, so now we can edit a compilation video of us all like
there you go.
Hearing
I'll add to it.
Thank you.
There you go.
Fantastic. Okay, so related. Obviously, we're here on the Bountifull Podcast. What does it mean to you to live a bountiful life?
Yeah, bountiful to me speaks to fullness and aliveness. And something I learned about myself and my priorities in the past is they were pretty one-dimensional, and work encompassed so much of my life and identity and my energy. And the work I've been doing on myself and now I'm helping others do is to find just a much more balanced and integrated life. And so, you know, a bountiful life to me, full but not busy. There's spaciousness in it. Like spaciousness is a really big theme for me right now. I have this rule for myself, default to spaciousness. Like if I have the option of filling in my day with another meeting or adding another project to my plate, or just any time when I feel like I'm squeezing in, just step back and like default to spaciousness. And that's been really transformative for how I spend my time and the energy I have throughout the day. Yeah, that's what
I saw you post that the other day on LinkedIn, which you guys should go follow him on LinkedIn. Very kind of thought-provoking stuff. And I was trying to book this trip in, and I said to husband, I was like, should I book in more? And he's like, just chill. And I was like, okay. And then I thought about it, just like, oh yeah, this is feeling good. I don't need to add. And also, why do we default cram things in rather than hold? Do you think it's like an achievement thing, or like where does the desire to fill every aspect of our day?
For me, a lot of it comes back to the concept of enoughness. And so what is enough? It's okay to want. It's okay to have things that you crave. We're human. But where's the line? How much money is enough? How many friends is enough? How much social interaction is enough? How much reputation is enough? And I know for me, a lot of the stories I've held about myself, and I think it's part of the culture that we have in America of it's never enough. It's all about competition and more, build the American dream, achieve wealth, achieve greatness. There's no line though where it's like, all right, you've done it. Congrats. You can just hang out now, right? It's just more wealth, more greatness, more reputation, more legacy. And so just becoming aware of that, becoming aware of the fact that there are things you want, but you actually have no idea what would actually feel enough. And maybe just asking that question will lead you to knowing where the line is, where you can start to say no and bring more spaciousness into your life.
It's funny. For me, just culturally, coming from New Zealand, we have this like saying where enough for us is the batch, the boat, and the BMW.
Okay.
And that's like the ambition, which is a bit trite, and maybe like culturally we've moved on. But for for me, I kind of got the inverse from America when I moved to San Francisco, and I was kind of grappling with this, like, what is enough for me? And kind of San Francisco, there was extremes of everything, right? But then I also realized that someone's always going to be richer, wealthier, more successful, like all of those things. And then I was like, well, it's not that I didn't want to try do like as much as I could. It was more just like a deep surrender into the realization that there's always going to be someone with more, so you might as well just like not worry about that and like kind of figure out what is enough for you. But I did that at quite a young age, which I think actually was super helpful for me to not always be like more.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing is there's like a competitive aspect to it, right? Like I can't have enough if I see someone else with more. Or I need to be the best. And that's definitely a story I've held for myself, is like, I need to be the best. I need to win. And so if someone else is winning more than me, that means I still got work to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then that manifests in myself as self-judgment, as self-criticism, as something in me needs to change, or something in my life needs to change for me to feel like I'm enough. And it just becomes this never-ending battle and spiral. For me, that was the root of a great deal of anxiety and depression and just not, whatever the opposite of bountiful life is, I feel like is what I was embodying for a long time.
It's like a problem to be fixed rather than just a...
Life's beautiful as is. There's a version of this world and society that we could have created and maybe in some places exists where we work together as a community to all have enough and with the purpose of just experiencing life, having enough to experience and be present with life.
Tangent, but related. Do you think that's possible? And what would that look like? And we're kind of in this interesting time in life where, like, I don't really want to get into universal basic income or whatever, but like more and more people have a desire to not work. And there's a point in the future, I think, where that could, become possible. And then we run into this issue of what do we do with our time? Because people are so used to working, filling their time with like earning, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Is it possible?
Yeah.
So the reality is we have a floor that we have to meet financially to be okay in this country. If you wanted to just live a life of servitude, of giving, that's not really an option if you want to be okay, let alone if you have kids and a family and others to take care of like I do. I live in a very expensive suburb north of the city. We moved back here because we wanted to be close to our family. And just to be okay, I'll give you the specific numbers, just to be okay for a family of 4 in Westchester, you need to be making about $300K per year total. And that's not a lavish life. That's like 3-bedroom house, couple vacations a year. Yeah.
School.
Eat dinner once in a while. Daycare, school, so expensive. So there's a floor in how much we can say, like, I'm just not going to care about work or hustle or achievement. You kind of have to some degree, unless we were to implement more of these kind of like universal basic income socialist policies, which I think would be great.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do. There's a lot of really good studies and experiments finally being run around it. But that's all to say, like, yes, there's a floor, and I would actually disagree that it's not that, I don't think that it's that people don't want to work. I think they want to do work that feels aligned and makes them feel alive. Yeah. And they want to work in a capacity and they want an amount of work that feels healthy and aligned and is additive to their life. I think humans, we love to create. We love to build. We are, like, to our DNA, we are builders and creators. And the reason why we create matters. And so that's probably the core lesson I learned for myself is if I'm creating and achieving from a place of not enoughness, I am not enough, and I need to achieve this thing or build this thing or get this reputation in order to feel like I'm enough, then that work is going to feel really misaligned. It's going to be energetically draining, right? The return on energy is negative. I'm putting more energy in than I'm getting out. And that's why we have so many people experiencing burnout.
Yeah.
And for me, I also will describe a concept of like being hollowed out, just like an emptiness in the work. And the journey I've been on is to like those parts of my ego that crave those things in order to feel like I'm enough needed to step back. And I needed those layers of my identity to peel away. And I needed to sit in nothingness for a while, which is fucking terrifying.
Yep.
But then gradually I started to be able to tune in to my own body, to what I just genuinely felt called to do. Like how do I want to be spending my time? How do I want to help people? And if something came my way that felt aligned, I would say yes. If it felt not aligned, I'd say no. And over time that compounds into, I've only said yes to things that feel aligned. And I am now slowly creating work and a career that is all in full alignment. The question is, can I do that and still meet that floor? Jury's still out on that one. I believe I can.
Love that. Return on energy.
Yeah.
There needs to be more mainstream. How do you see the world?
I think I see the world as this just beautiful, complex system. Like everything is connected and integrated in ways that are so complex we could never possibly understand. And that's beautiful and terrifying.
And then you've talked a little bit about this, but how do you see yourself now?
A work in progress, a piece of the web of all of these complex interacting pieces and bits. A dad, a friend, a coach. I think someone asked me just yesterday, I was talking about this journey and kind of my past identity, and they're like, what's your identity today? And I realized I have a really hard time answering that question, because I guess I see it as you can answer the question in two ways. The way that you can put into words is always going to be limited, and you're putting it into words in order to describe yourself to others. So to try to communicate to someone else, who are you? And there's just no amount of words, there's no breadth of words to be able to fully articulate who you are and all the multitudes that exist within a person.
Yeah.
Right? So I can name dad, entrepreneur, white man. I can name all these things, and you still will know a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of who I am.
Yeah.
And then there's the other way of looking at identity, which is the way without words, which is just
Here I am
in this present moment, the body I have, the collection of stories I hold in my mind, the energy I hold.
Love that.
In ways I can't explain, this is who I am.
I had a moment the other day, and this is not to be trite. Like, I think that's beautiful. But, like tech identity, like being a community builder, all of those sorts of things. When I moved back to New Zealand and moved down to the mountains, I really didn't necessarily want to be surrounded by people that worked in startups, because I was just like a little bit burnt out from that whole scene. Yeah. It's very noisy and theatrical and all of those things. I'm like, just get on and build shit. Like, if you want to build shit, build shit. And then I went through the airport the other day, and so I've been finding this whole like transition into like this super aligned, bountiful, sharing joy through stories, really going to the core of like who people are and what they believe in and some of their joy that they can share with the world. And the security guy in customs was like, because I've got all my kit in my suitcase, he was like, "Are you a YouTuber?" Yes. No, I was like, well, not really, but I'm like, I'm just going to roll with it because it's closer to my current identity than any other that I don't really want to embrace anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you for recognizing that I have a tripod and a whole bunch of cameras. So I was like, I'm here for it. Sure, today I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll be something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I smiled on that one. I was like, text husband, I was like, I got asked if I was a YouTuber. That's just like a bit of a lol.
Yeah, it's nice to be seen in a way that you want to be seen, especially when you're trying to distance yourself from a past identity and someone sees you with fresh eyes as who you are today rather than, whatever baggage or history you have.
Yeah.
I've gone through a similar experience with like trying on the title coach, which felt like at first, like, I don't know if this suit fits.
Yeah, you're like, ooh.
And then, my relationship with the community builder identity and to what extent I still want to hold on to that and to what extent I want to let it go.
What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
I hate giving advice.
Even to yourself?
Yeah, because I don't know.
Okay, what would you say to your 25-year-old self? Not advice.
I don't know how I would say it, but I'd want my 25-year-old self to know that he is already enough and that there's nothing he needs to do or accomplish in order to be enough. And that he's on the journey. It may not feel linear. It isn't linear. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But just keep going because that's your journey. Like, I think the interesting thing with these questions where it's like, what advice would you give your past self is like this idea, what comes to mind is like, well, what could I say that would change or fix or alter the path of this 25-year-old? And if I did that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't have the learnings and the experiences. I wouldn't have been on the journey that brought me to where I am today. And I'm very happy and very grateful, very blessed to be where I am today. Yep. So probably wouldn't tell him anything. Just watch. Just be like, whoa, cool. It's my 25-year-old self. That's weird.
Wild. So we kind of know why we're going to change gears a little bit, get into community and belonging. So we know that you founded CMX to bring a fairly nascent industry together, or group of people who were doing things that they didn't really know what they were doing. And you're like, I'm doing community building. I didn't realize that it had a name. It's a common thing. How would you say that your journey with CMX and this, community building and the communities you've been part of have shaped your views on community and belonging in general?
I mean, I think it makes it clear, like I've experienced very viscerally the loneliness that people are experiencing and how much they crave and yearn for community. I think by spending so much time working in community for businesses, I've witnessed the shortcomings of community within a business container and the ways that it can't fill up our social cup in the way that I think we often hope it will. And I think just over time, just seeing truths or themes or consistencies in how people connect and why they connect, and watching conflict rise and how people navigate conflict, and frankly, how ill-equipped we are in society today to hold conflict with each other.
Yep.
You think to earlier, like indigenous communities and the way they would bring conflict to the community and what they do when conflict arises and how the elders play a role and how they hold a container for it. They don't just set it aside. They don't create divisiveness. Like that would be the end of the community. And we don't have that anymore. Our court system is like that's the only system we have for managing conflict. And on an interpersonal basis, we don't have systems. We don't have knowledge. We don't have wisdom around it.
I don't know if you've found this, but I sort of feel like there's less and less safe spaces in the world. And my life, I kind of feel like people are less inclined to voice things now. They just hold it in because the potential of letting it out usually has negative consequences, whereas I think before people were more able to like put the issue or whatever it is on the table or the difference, kind of look at it and be like, well, here's how I think about that. How do you think about that? And it wasn't like an attack on the person. It was like a sort of a view of the idea, and maybe you might learn something from having a difference of opinion, whereas I feel like differences and those sorts of things are less shared these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, social media has played a huge role in that, right? Like anything you say will exist on there forever and can be shared. Like anything you say can potentially reach literally every person in the world. That's a really hard container to process conflict together.
Yeah.
Right? Like for conflict to really be processed and for things to be put on the table, there has to be this trust. You have to be able to share those things without fear of judgment. At least on a personal level, the idea should absolutely be judged, but the person, knowing that it's a space where like I can share this and it won't be misconstrued. You know who's in the room, you know who's listening, you know what the intentions of each person is in the room, but now it's been blown up into social media where maybe the conflict is happening on social media and there's just no system for managing it. Or maybe it is happening in a room, but now that people can share things on social media, there's always this fear of like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I offend? What if I don't articulate this in the way that would make as many people happy as possible, right? These are stories that go through my head a lot. And so for me, and I think a lot of people, it's easier to just avoid the conflict altogether.
Yeah. So you wrote a book, The Business of Belonging, that has been quite influential in the community building world. What was your reason for writing the book? And then maybe we can talk about some of the thematics that it discusses.
Yeah. I wrote the book, I'd say primarily as a way to capture all the things I had learned up to that point about community and the profession and just create like a single guide that I can hand to somebody and they can kind of get the overview. And it was like a good challenge, a good creative challenge to take all the frameworks that our team developed and all the lessons I've learned and like put it together, synthesize it into one cohesive book, one narrative. Yeah, almost like a gift to the industry and a way of, I don't know what the word, but like putting into physical form. Like I love the idea. I loved the idea of having like a physical artifact that can capture all of that. And ego. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to be someone who wrote a book. I wanted the reputation of a book. And business. It helped me with, growing consulting at the time and growing CMX and helping grow the CMX brand. So
it helps a lot of businesses build communities, which is great.
Yeah, ultimately my motivation with CMX in general has always been like, I always just got really excited by the idea of the ripple effects, the like total impact that we could have by helping community builders. Because by helping them do their job better and hopefully like also just be more successful and happy and thrive in their life, then they are going to take that and bring it into their community, which can have hundreds or thousands and sometimes millions of members. So the total positive impact that we could have with the work we were doing was massive. And I think the book very much aligned with that as well.
Yeah, I love that. How would you like to share some of the learnings around like your years and years and years of building communities and advising community managers? Are there, I know it's a bit trite to try pack it all into, a few minutes, but are there any like core
tenets or philosophies or learnings that you had that people could take away where they're like, okay, in order to, if I am going to build a community, here's some of the things it should have, or here's, maybe the more positive things, and then we can talk about the
So I think my core philosophy around community, which I actually didn't talk too much in the book about because it didn't really synthesize at that point, but it's really become clear to me that communities are complex systems, going back to complexity and complexity science, which means that we can't control them and we can't predict them. There's many, many parts that are all interacting in ways that aren't consistent. So the same way we can't control the weather, we can't control exactly how a city forms, we can't control how a human body forms. These are all complex systems. So this idea that you can have a framework and like create like a 12-month plan for a community, I think is false and generally setting you up for failure. So I look at communities as emergents. They are emergent systems. So the way I think about building community is we have to be able to tune in to what is the community that people are yearning for. I think people are always yearning for connection. It's part of the human condition. But what are they yearning for? What are they missing? What form of connection are they lacking today? And you're looking to find that. You're looking to create a container that people are yearning for. And when you do that, when they truly are yearning for it, and you create it and you offer them the right invitation, community will just flow into that container. You don't have to do too much. It's just going to work. You don't have to over-facilitate. You don't have to, if you feel like you're forcing it or you're pushing people to like engage or participate, it's not, you haven't figured it out yet. You haven't found community member fit. I'll give you an example from last night. I went to a community event called Reading Rhythms, where they call it a social reading party. And
you like read a book?
Yeah, you bring a book. There's about 40, 50 other people. They always do it in like a vibey space. There's always like lo-fi music or live, like very calming music. And, they have the structure they created, which is you arrive for like 15, 20 minutes. You can just kind of chat. 30 minutes is a reading block. So everyone quietly reading, which is a beautiful experience to be in a room with everyone at a bar, but it's quiet with like just calm music. It felt almost like a meditation group. And then they do a 15-minute talk with a partner, and then another 30-minute reading block. And then they have these like themes around the room, and you can go to a group for the last 30 minutes and talk. And I mean, just they figured something out where like having a book is the greatest icebreaker. Like it's so easy I've never been to an event where it was so easy to talk to people. And it just like, it flowed. And like, you could feel the energy in the room. You could sense that people wanted to be there. They were excited to be there. They loved talking about the books and learning about what other people are reading, or, oh, I read that book. It just like filled easily without the organizers. Like they said their spiel. They kind of like gave very little guidance. They didn't have to do anything. The room was filled with connection because they crafted the right container, and it just emerges within that. And so that's how I think about communities and how they form. And if you're a community creator or you're looking to build community, the approach and how you navigate complex systems, this is from something called the Sinafin framework, which is used for navigating complex systems and complex decision-making, is you run experiments. They call probe, sense, respond. So I have this idea for what community wants to exist in the world. Often it's the one that I'm craving for myself. That's almost always how the best communities form, is people just solving their own problem. And they probe, they try it, they sense, how did it go? Were people excited to be here? Was there energy? Or did I have fun? Do people want to come back? And then you respond based on how it went. You keep doing what you're doing if it felt like it worked. You adapt things if you felt like you found some stuff, but you need to tweak it. If it didn't work, great, try another probe. And you keep doing that until community naturally emerges.
Yearning, connection, it kind of all, I always encourage people that you've really got to figure out this psyche of like, what do they want? And build for that. Well, not build, that's the wrong word, but like, you know, people go, oh, we've got this thing, and so we're going to have a community. And you're like, well, do they want it?
Right. Yeah.
No.
And how do you know?
Yeah.
And something that's fun that I've been doing is, you can think about the psyche, and like, I've always taken a very intellectual approach of like, what do they want? Like, I can do market research and interviews, but I've been guiding people through somatic community design meditation because I believe that community is something we feel. Like we said at the very beginning of the conversation, it's a sense of community. And I think that our bodies and our emotions know a lot more about what community wants to exist than we realize. And so in the meditation, I help people connect with their bodies, and I bring in almost like IFS is a therapeutic practice that I've had. It stands for internal family systems, where you can like identify your parts within you and interact with them. So I kind of took that and like have people envision the energy of their community within them, and then you can interact with it and feel into like, what is it that these people really, really are yearning for? Not just an intellectual problem, but like, what is this deep connection that only your community might be able to provide?
I totally get what you mean. I think the last community that emerged, mainly through my hands and brain, we had a conference. It's the first time we got in the community together, and we just knew exactly the container these people wanted and what they were missing and how they were feeling. It helped that they were lawyers, and most people hate lawyers. So, sorry, lawyers, if you're listening to this. But they were really starved for connection because most of their organisation really didn't like them because they're an obstacle to getting things done a lot of the time. Whereas like we were like, can we reposition you to actually being helpful? And then we kind of took them on a journey in order to do that, but it like kind of did what we said we would do. But the first conference, I could not explain or put into words the vibe in the room. It was like the most joyful, energetic thing I'd been a part of for a really long time. And then, you know, businesses always have to measure shit. And even like CMO and CEO, they kind of went back to the business and they're like, it was awesome. It was so cool, like just amazing energy. Don't know how to describe it. Just could not describe like the sense, the feels, the everything. Everyone kind of knew that they'd been part of something like super special, but didn't have the words to. Feelings really hard to measure.
Yeah, and I mean, today we try to default to data for everything, right? We use data. We always need smart goals, right? Is it measurable?
KPIs.
And I think we often turn to data for things that our bodies already know. Like that's why people are like, oh, how do I know my community's working? It's like, you know. You could step in any room and feel the energy. We're equipped with this detection system for social energy. And that's such a beautiful experience that you shared. It sounds like those lawyers came into a room where for the first time they felt understood and seen. They didn't have to explain themselves. They didn't have to put a mask on. They were accepted for who they are in a way that broader society doesn't. And I think that's really where communities that thrive, they create a space where people feel normal in a way that the rest of society doesn't.
And there's some wild communities out there. So
some weird ones,
some interesting ones.
And the same is true, by the way, for like extreme communities, right? That's why a lot of like young men will turn to like really violent extreme communities because it's the first place they found that made them feel accepted and normal.
Can you hack belonging, or is there an attribute of putting yourself out there?
Serendipity is a powerful element of forming relationships. And the more you put yourself out there and increase the surface area of the amount of interactions and the type of people you're meeting, the more you give yourself a better chance of serendipity occurring, of finding a person that you just click with.
Yeah.
I do think you have to click with people, and there's no hack for clicking with someone that you just aren't aligned with. And I do think, hack's kind of a loaded word. I do think there are moves you can make to help you meet people, help you show up differently, help open up conversations, help connect with people in a different way. So, yeah, I think social interaction is a skill.
Why do you think communities sort of have pushed into the business world? It's like before it was kind of like neighborhoods and, tribes and, kind of more geographic things. And then we've also got like mountain bikers or, like interest kind of things. Why do you think communities now pushed into the business world and businesses are now creating communities? Not necessarily just because they realize it's good for their profit, but like, what about the more like organic examples of like community emerging in the business world?
I think community's always been a part of the business world. The form has just evolved over time. Actually, literally the word company is com and panis, so coming together over bread.
Right.
And it was when merchants used to like come from all over, they'd meet, they'd eat together and trade goods.
Yeah.
A business is a social construct. A business exists because people come together to create something. So a business itself is a form of community. Going back to what we talked about before, it's a specific form of community with a very specific container that's rooted in a contract that is transactional. And so you need to set your expectations on the kind of community you expect from a business all within that container.
Yeah.
Maybe don't call it your family, for example, right? It's not your family. It's a contract that can end tomorrow. And I think they've always had some form of, as long as there's been brands, there have been fans of brands, right? And so you kind of have these like fan-based type communities around businesses. And so that took the form before the internet of just people maybe getting together in person. Like it's evolved with our form of communication as people have been able to connect and communicate in greater ways and broader ways and bigger ways. The community has expanded or adapted to fill in that space, right? So, and then once social media came about and the internet came about, we can now connect to people across geographies and with like at really, really large numbers that we couldn't before. And so we did, right? And so that was naturally what was going to happen for businesses, right? Their fan bases are going to use the channels available to them to connect, which turned into social media and these like really big networks. And from like a strategy standpoint in terms of like the community industry and why that has become a thing, I think it is profit at the end of the day.
With like commoditized belonging.
Well, again, a business lives by one rule. It's a contract, and that one rule says we have to make more money than we spend. And that's the rule. We've all decided when we signed this contract, we are abiding by this rule.
Yep.
And so that means that everything we do in a business has to make money or
contribute to making money.
It all has to make money. And anything we're investing in is either making money now or we are just such a big business that we actually don't really, we don't have to worry about it so much, so we can invest in these things that are more loosely connected to revenue. I believe in community. It's important. I know it adds to value over time, even if we can't perfectly measure it. The only companies who can do that are the ones who are flush with cash to the point where they don't have to worry. But we've already seen in the recent market downturn, when you're not flush with cash, you have to make decisions on what to cut and what not to. Companies are going to decide to cut the things that can't clearly show return. And so doesn't mean that community is leaving the business, because there are still customers, there are still fans, there are still employees. Like, the community is always there. The extent to which a business formalizes it and puts resources behind serving it and operating it is really dictated by the health of the company from a financial standpoint.
How do you see the relationship between community and personal well-being, and can belonging to a community improve our mental and emotional health?
I think one thing that I've learned for myself is that we're never really going to find the full extent of belonging that we yearn for from others and from community.
Mm.
We can only truly find that within ourselves.
Mm.
And it's only once we belong to ourselves that we can then find meaningful, aligned belonging in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And this goes back to what we talked about before with identity. Like, no one can accept me fully because no one can know me fully, because I contain these multitudes and there's no amount of words I can use to describe who I am. So they can only accept the parts of me that they see, that they understand, that intertwine with their own stories, their own identity. And, I think I spent most of my life trying to find belonging and enoughness, which I think are maybe the same thing, from other people in communities. And it's only once I really started to find belonging within myself and was able to practice self-love that I started to feel okay and find enoughness and not be looking around at other people and other communities like, please, like, give me belonging. I can now come from a place of, I'm enough.
Yeah.
I already belong to myself, and I'm now seeking connection through that belief rather than looking for connection to reinforce that belief. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I've got an experience in my brain, but I don't know. I wouldn't have a clue how to articulate, which is kind of the point. Fascinating. In a bit of a tangent, but I live in a small town now, maybe 9,000 people.
Yeah.
And I would say that I belong to my gym. The fascinating thing with my gym is it is like the epicenter of the community.
Yeah.
All walks of life go over there. They've got an open space. The staff are super loved. They're all very different. And the entire community loves going to that gym. Because they've created such an open environment for anyone to do their workout, to chat, to come, to meet people. And I've never seen a institution in a small community like that, or any community that is such like a mecca for belonging. And I don't use that word very often. Like, I wouldn't say that I belong to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I do think that I belong to that gym.
What is it about the gym that you think offers you that sense of belonging?
Just like its openness, and it's not, what gyms like. There's like crowds that go to gyms of like different types of people. Yeah. This one is like, there's no judgment. Yeah. You just rock up. They're friendly. Yeah. They chat to you. You're kind of part of the furniture. It's not fancy. It's like super old and, just almost like a big warehouse. But I think it's the people that make it. Yeah. And whether you're 90 or, like trying to lose weight or trying to build muscle, whatever it is, or you just like want to go, I go because I need to get out of the house and not be a hermit. Otherwise, I would live quite a lonely existence sometimes. Just seeing their bright little faces, and I sort of wonder sometimes if they realise the outsized impact that they have on our little community, just by like being who they are.
Yeah. Have you told them?
Kinda.
Sure, they'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you're in that space?
Just like fun.
Good.
And like productive.
Mm-hmm.
You just smile at people. It's also like there's a guy, he brings in his kid, and I love that they get like dad time. Yeah. And they're always there. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, what a powerful
that's cool
role model and like I love seeing men hang out with their kids.
Yeah.
Because, like parenting is so gendered still and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I'm like, like getting a kid into the gym at a young age, maybe like for certain reasons, don't know what the reasons are, obviously don't know them, but I just think it's a gift and I kind of love seeing it. And I love that everyone else is just like, it's cool. You do you. Like, you're not like, get the kid out of the gym.
Right.
Whereas a lot of people would.
They welcome it.
Yeah.
They're excited about it. It brings energy rather than sucks energy out of their own.
That was a super tangent. Sorry.
No, that's such a wonderful example. And I think, I think that we also have a social health component to our well-being.
Yeah.
Right. So we have physical health, we have mental health, and I think we have social health. So my point before of like belonging to yourself is not meant to say that you don't need to belong to others or you don't need social connection. Again, it is wired into us to the extent that when we feel isolated and alone, it actually feels like we're going to die because that's how we evolved. Because for a long time, that was true.
Yeah.
If you were isolated from the community, you were as good as dead. And so when we feel isolated, our heart rates pick up, we feel anxiety and stress. We literally feel like this threat, this fight or flight response. So we need social connection. But we want to find social connection that is genuinely fulfilling. And like, if you look at it like health, like we have nutritional health, like what social connection is nutritious and healing, right? Because we get a lot of social connection from social media, for example. That's like empty calories.
Yeah.
It's like if all you ate was donuts.
Kind of yum, love donuts.
Yum, but you don't want to survive solely on those, right?
No.
And so, what I'm hearing from your experience is that this is a place that really embodies a lot of your values and the things that are important to you. Joy, fun, welcoming, like inclusion and acceptance of parenthood. Not too like fancy. You appreciate its like groundedness. And I know from knowing you and from the conversations we've had that you've developed a great deal of self-awareness about what's important to you and what feels aligned for you. And so that led you to that community and gave you the awareness to know this is a place for me where I can find belonging that's meaningful to me. Same way we're doing this conversation now and the journey you've been on to find work that feels aligned is because you've done that work. You've found, here's who I am. This is what's important to me. I don't need to change that to get belonging from others. I already belong to myself. And now you can choose work and choose a gym and choose spaces that feel aligned with the belonging you've already found within. If you don't have that inner belonging, that self-love, now you're just going to seek connection anywhere you can find it. And you have no gauge of like, does this actually fill me up? Does this actually feel like nutrition? And so that's the relation between like the inner work and community work or community experience that is really important.
Controversial question, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to do the inner work to be a good community builder?
That's a great question. I think you have to do the inner work to be a conscious community builder. Our stories, our beliefs, our patterns within ourselves will become the culture and the stories of the communities that we create and interact in. If I have a belief, if I crave reputation and I crave community, that craving is going to show up in that community and become something that others experience and maybe even see it as like, this is how to belong here. If I'm conflict avoidant, I'm going to create a space that eliminates as much conflict as possible and doesn't create space for it. And you can imagine how that's going to show up in the story and the culture of the community. So our stories, our patterns become the culture of the community. And if you're unconscious of those stories and those patterns, right? If we talk about inner work being basically becoming more aware of yourself, if you're unconscious of those patterns, then they show up in the community unconsciously in ways that you probably did not intend and may have negative impacts. If you're conscious, if you've become aware of those stories, then you're aware. And when you're building community, you can be more intentional about where those stories come in and where they don't feel aligned with the kind of community and space that you want to create.
Yeah.
So I think conscious community leadership is a conversation I'd like to see happen a lot more, because I think that's really what a lot of us are missing.
Where my brain went with that was around, I kind of did a flash of like all the communities that I've been a part of.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if we had more conscious community building going on with the transition of community builder. The communities which should be able to transition people much easier, because the culture is much easier to understand. Whereas if you're not building them consciously, it's super hard to articulate what are those stories and narratives that have to be consistently continued. Maybe that makes sense. Like, I wonder if the reason why communities break down often is because the passing of the torch is done badly or those sorts of things. But there's some things that in terms of like how I would show up in my capacity, like the kind of word that I have is like humanness. Like, I'm always trying to find the humanness in others, and that's how I like try to build. I really want to build those connections based on our like humanness and really seeing people for who they are and then putting them together, and that, 'cause then that to me is like longevity, even if it's in a business context, not just because they like, I don't know, have the same job title or something, which is like can be a little bit more arbitrary. Like, there's no necessarily long-term connection. But I can't expect another community builder to understand my like stories and desire to like connect humanity or whatever.
Yeah, the more intentional we're able to be, the easier it is for us to communicate what it is that makes the community we've created special, and help other people be able to replicate that. Or the more attuned we are to whether or not someone's actually a good fit to be a leader representing the community.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to do the quick fire questions.
Okay.
So these might feel a little bit random, but what, in your opinion, is the most underrated fruit or vegetable, and how do you like to have it?
And how do I like to have it?
Yeah.
Underrated fruit or vegetable, how do I like to have it? I mean, I wouldn't say it's underrated necessarily, but it's underrated in the way I have it. I would say tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes. I can just snack on those all day. I don't need to have it in a salad or anything, just straight.
Yeah, I used to do that too. People used to, but I would do like a whole tomato, eat it like an apple.
Oh, there should be a community for that. People who eat tomatoes whole.
Little me loved big tomatoes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you drink, but if you do, what's your favorite cocktail?
I occasionally do, a lot less than I used to. Old fashioned.
Can see that. Worst meal that your parents made you eat?
My dad's going to kill me for this, but he did most of the cooking in our house, and he's Irish and English. And so like a lot of the meals were just a little bland flavor. So like we'd have just like plain chicken sometimes with like no seasoning. And he's gotten much better these days, but
it's good. Go down.
I'd say that.
Word that describes your life?
Alive.
What are you most proud of?
The first thing that came to mind was my kids, but that feels like cheating because it's like, how much did I really do? So I'll say my relationship with my wife.
Do you have any tenets that you live by?
Yeah, they're evolving. I think default to spaciousness is one. Follow the joy. It's a big one for me. And I think, at least at this chapter of my life, just seek deeper connection. Like look for opportunities to have deeper, more meaningful connections rather than surface level connections.
Is that in terms of friendships or just in general? Like if you could have a deep connection with someone making you a coffee, would that count?
Good question. Yeah, I think it's probably both in subtle ways. I think it's more so in friendship and who I choose to spend my time with. And, most of my calls these days, for example, I say no to most calls that are like reaching out for advice. I really it has to be clear this is going to be like a meaningful, heartfelt conversation. Almost all of them are phone calls. So we get off Zoom, I go take a walk in the woods, and they're almost always an hour so that we can really have spaciousness to go deep together.
Yeah.
And so, I think the spaciousness in a way is related of when I do connect with people, and maybe it's the barista, just look for opportunities to deepen.
I love that. What's one thing that's really mattered in life that maybe you didn't realize mattered so much?
Me.
And then the inverse, what's something that you thought mattered but realized that it doesn't matter at all?
I'll say this is an aspiration to believe that it doesn't matter at all, but I would say like reputation or legacy.
I had a question pop up that I think kind of is important to ask you. So you are making more time for deep connection, having that space. What do you do when, say, you've created all of this space in your life, you're doing a lot of work on yourself, you've got a lot of intentionality around how you're living? A lot of people aren't doing that. And so what do you do when you're met with where you really want to have a connection with someone that is flying around, busy, or they're not in that same zone?
Yeah.
So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common thing I've heard from people who are on some sort of spiritual journey or inner work journey, where it's like they've kind of reached this level of awareness and then they lose friends or have trouble in relationships because they don't feel like they're on the same level. A couple thoughts. One, everybody has something to teach you. If you're feeling an aversion to talking to someone, I would explore that aversion because there's probably some good work to do there. You can't force anybody to move along in their own journey of becoming more self-aware or conscious than they're ready for. But you can also look for opportunities to be somebody to hold that space for them when they're ready to take the next step. And I've had incredible humans be that person for me, and I love to be that person for others, which is what ended up bringing me to the work of coaching. A lot of my clients are bouncing off walls, and I sometimes will have a story or I'll notice an urge to just get them to where I know that I can see them getting to, getting them to this much more aware level. But I've learned I need to just meet them with where they're at and support them in the pace that they're comfortable going in.
Yep. Do you have any final advice? You don't like giving advice. Do you have any final thoughts for people wanting to be part of a community or to find more places to belong? I guess provided that they've started belonging in themselves.
I think if you don't find anywhere where you belong, create it. I think everyone has the skills and ability to be a community builder. And that doesn't mean you have to launch a forum or a large event. It can be as simple as you want to bring a new dynamic to a group of friends or someone you met recently. And so organize a bowling night, be the one to organize instead of just waiting for others to organize for you.
My one in response to this question is there's always someone else that shares this interest. You just have to find them. It's rare that you would be the only person in the world that is interested in whatever the place is that you want to belong.
Yeah, and lean into your quirks.
What makes me say that is when I started, I went on sabbatical, which we haven't talked about. And I got really into gardening, which is just so me, and love growing things. I mean, I'm wearing a green jacket. I'm really embody, this whole green vibes. But I just felt so fundamentally boring because everyone in my life was startups and tech. And then I'm this is how you grow the perfect pumpkin. did it belong to this, like right now I don't really care about B2B SaaS. Like I really just want to grow corn and stuff. And then I joined this Facebook group that had like 100,000 people in it. And it was like just New Zealand. And every question every day is like, hey, is my pumpkin ready? I'm like, come on, it's like the 20th post. That was glorious. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I feel boring over here.
Right, yeah.
But then I feel totally seen over here.
Yeah.
Which was pretty great. But I had to go actively like find, a gardening group to be a part of.
Yeah. I think that the hard part is finding it sometimes. Like I think there's a community out there for everyone. If it doesn't exist, it wants to exist. And like I said, you have the opportunity to be the one to spark it. It's looking for you, right? You have to, again, go back to like surface area, like keep looking, keep meeting people. It's an act of bravery, right? I think it's truly an act of bravery to put yourself out there and to seek new relationships, because the fear that we hold often is that we're going to be rejected, we're going to be isolated, we're going to be alone.
People laugh at us.
People laugh at us. And again, that can feel like you are dying. And so it's an act of bravery. So show yourself some grace, tap into your bravery, pace yourself. It's like fitness as well. You don't want to go in bench pressing twice your weight. Go in with the amount of social interaction in the forums that are, maybe it's at your edge, challenge yourself a little bit. And say hi to a stranger, meet new people.
Final one on that is like start small. I remember my first like event I had at Kiwi Landing Pad, I think 5 people came and then I cried. So I was like, no one likes me, this is a failure. And then one of the Kiwi founders patted me on the back and he was like, just do another one. And I was like, oh yeah. And then next time like 30 people came and I was like, oh, okay, so it's not me. You just have to build momentum.
Yeah, I think what you said is really important. It was like, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. We live in a society right now that is not very well designed to help us form and find community. We don't grow up in it in the same way. I hope it's changing, but
it's not really changing.
It's hard. It's hard to find connection and community and belonging. And so just acknowledge that it's a hard thing. You're doing a hard thing. Start small.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
David, thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us on the Bountiful Podcast today. For all of our listeners, I hope that you've enjoyed our meandering chat around community, both in a work and professional sense, and belonging. I think we've got a lot of really valuable insights into belonging to yourself in order to seek connection with others, which is a surprise and delight. For those of you interested in David's work, we will include all of his relevant links that he feels like are representative of where he's at in life now in the show notes. And if today's episode resonated with you or left you inspired, don't forget to follow and subscribe for more enriching conversations. Our season is filled with extraordinary guests from diverse backgrounds, all contributing to our exploration of what it truly means to lead a bountiful life. So thank you, and thank you for holding space and being here today.
I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation after all these years.
Thank you.